Good morning. Can everyone hear me? Just give a thumbs up. I'm really so happy to be here, and I'm very happy that you guys have taken time out of your very busy schedule, particularly the teachers who kind of have very little or no idea of what's going to transpire in the next couple weeks. So I do see from a list of participants that many of our dual credit teachers are here. They're going to have to watch this short presentation one more time. So as Gail said, I taught at Egg Harbor Township High School for many years. Just to let you know that I started in 1981, and we also left Doug Servey off the list of teachers. He always wants to best me. I think he taught for 40 years. But for those of you who might be interested in the Holocaust and Genocide Dual Credit Consortium, I have a really short version of presentation. And at the end of this presentation, there's my contact information. You can always get to me, stephen.marcus@stockton.edu. So Morgan, if you would hit the next slide. There we go. We have Pleasantville High School. Oh, no, we go back a little bit. There we go. There's Pleasantville High School at the Extraordinary Heroism of Ordinary People exhibit. This is the story of Leo Ullman. As Gail said yesterday, for those people who were there, we will make this available, but it's going to be online for the foreseeable future. Next slide, please. So what is the Holocaust and Genocide Dual Credit Consortium? It's currently the largest dual, I don't know why that's misspelled, sorry, program at Stockton. I'm the faculty coordinator, and I have almost 40 years of teaching experience at the high school and university levels. Starting in Vineland High School and Holy Spirit High School, still in the program, when I began, the program has expanded to 30 schools as of the fall of 2020. With the addition of Winslow Township. And this is all thanks to the very generous support of the School of General Studies, the Sarah and Sam Schofer Holocaust Resource Center, the William J. Hughes Center for Public Policy, and of course the Sam Aziz Museum of Woodbine Heritage. Next, please. So the benefits of participating in the dual credit program are great. For our teachers, opportunities for professional development, access to special exhibits and performances, and a working partnership with Stockton University. So I know there are other dual credit programs. They're very good, but the big difference is access to Stockton University. For your students, 4 transferable college credits at a greatly reduced cost, access to the Stockton University Library, exclusive access to the USC Shoah Foundation archives, opportunities to meet survivors and special speakers. And obviously, you know, in a better world, which is going to happen at some time in hopefully the near future, a lot of these things will be live. But for right now, we're going to do everything online. So if you could hit the next slide. Morgan put this together, and we started with the 2 schools, and we're up to 30 schools. If your school is on this list, phenomenal. If your school isn't on this list, you might want to look around and see if any rival schools are. And we actively accept partnership with new schools. So we're in negotiations right now for 3 or 4 more schools, and some exciting stuff is about to happen. Next slide, please. This is what it's all about. This is Mainland Regional High School and a trip to the Museum of Jewish Heritage for the Auschwitz exhibition, sponsored by and paid for by the Sarah and Sam Schofer Holocaust Resource Center. And don't those kids look happy? Next, please. Again, kids from Ocean City High School, the Genocide Fair at Eastern Regional High School, and a combination of trip to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum with Pleasantville and Sterling High School, also sponsored by the Sarah and Sam Show for Holocaust Resource Center. Next, please. The pièce de résistance, the reason why our Pleasantville High School kids were on campus, was the unveiling of the virtual Holocaust survivor. This is Ed Mossberg, and I'm sure that Gail will make that. She said will make that available to schools, and it's absolutely phenomenal. The press was there, people from the state were there, but most important, the kids from Pleasantville High School were there. And the next slide is just an informational slide. Please contact me, the coordinator of Holocaust and Genocide Dual Credit Consortium. And there is my Stockton email, and that is my personal phone number. So please, no prank calls. And hopefully we'll hear from you guys. Just send me an email. And I just want to say my dual credit teachers, our dual credit program is absolutely phenomenal. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Steve. And Steve, I'd like to ask you if you could put in the chat box your contact information so we have it there available in case it went a little too quickly. And I want to underline one of the things that two of the items that Steve mentioned. One is he used the word sponsored, and I'll be very specific what that means. We do have funding available for high school projects that are in dual high school credit program. And I want to be very specific, unless this has changed, Steve, and you'll interrupt me if it has. The cost of the credits is $100 a credit, which you know is a super bargain. And if you have any Title I students, that means it kind of equates to being eligible for the free lunch program. Stockton will and does underwrite all of the credits for your students. And what that means is we just went through freshman orientation. It was done virtually, but we had, I would say, probably about 24 students that came into Stockton with 4 credits in Holocaust and Genocide Studies, which means they can just automatically go into our minor program. And if you're not part of this, or you're friends with someone who is a high school teacher and they think they are qualified, we encourage you to tell them about this. So several of you, and please, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box and Steve will answer them this morning. Several of you said, darn it, I couldn't come yesterday to the workshop live from Jerusalem, where we spoke about icons of the Holocaust, as well as we introduced the participants to the Yad Vashem website. It was, of course, this is a very prejudiced point of view, spectacular. We learned a lot. And I just want to give a quick recap because it's 3 words. Rob Rosette started with the following theme, and Lori Gerson followed through on it. It's about the human story, talking about the individual. Unto every person there is a name, and to talk about the themes that go with all of us, the themes that go with our backgrounds, and the theme of what happened before. What was life before the Holocaust? What was life during? And we know now, which was spoken about yesterday, that geography and human behavior are very important factors to determine the fate of the Jews and other victims we spoke about yesterday, the Roma and the Sinti, the Gypsies, the Jehovah's Witnesses, the disabled. And perhaps some of these themes will come through today as we listen to Liz Ellsby. I want to tell you that yesterday's session was recorded. That means it'll be available in about a week to 10 days on our website, so you'll get to hear it. And today's session is being recorded. Very important link to this is this workshop, this education seminar is sponsored by Yad Vashem with Echoes and Reflections, the Sarah and Sam Schofer Holocaust Resource Center, and the Sam Aziz Museum of Woodbine Heritage. All of our funding comes from these sources, and it's very important to us that you complete the evaluations. This is one of the negatives about virtually doing a workshop or a seminar. I can't twist your arm. I can't say, come on, do it before you leave the room. So please, we're a little concerned because yesterday our return on the evaluations was not great, yet we received wonderful emails thanking us and telling us how important yesterday was in planning for the future for many of the teachers. So please, at the end of the workshop, you're going to receive 2 items, a PDH, professional development hours, and an evaluation. The evaluation should take you tops 3 to 4 minutes to complete. Please do that for us. There will not, as yesterday, be a break, but if you need to take a break, please do. We will go straight through. One of our themes is this is informal. I was not kidding when I say live from Jerusalem. Our presenter, Liz Elsby, is from Jerusalem. I'm going to introduce her in a few minutes, but know that that we may get into a glitch or two because Liz lives in a concrete apartment building. So we're hoping that we will not have any problems with her transmission. We've determined 3 themes as we're moving forward with our seminar. And it all relates to the time is now. We thank you all for coming. Again, right now, we have 50 participants, and we know that there are a few more that are in our waiting room because one must go through a security check before we allow you in. And we're very proud to tell you that we had somebody yesterday who did not want to join us because they wanted to learn. They wanted to join us to make, as my mother would say, mischief. So this is why it takes a little time to get in. So I'm looking at our waiting room, and we have a number of educators. I hope they're educators waiting to get screened and to come in. So our theme yesterday, and we'll continue to do that every day, is the time is now to learn together. The time is now to make plans. And don't we know just when we make the plans, we change them? Because things are changing every day. And the time is now to reflect and learn together. So ladies and gentlemen, it's with pleasure that I want to introduce to you Liz Elsby. And I love saying this, live from Jerusalem and backed by popular demand. And truly, last summer, Liz was here for a Yad Vashem workshop, and we had a problem recording all of her evaluations because there were so many positive comments that they wanted Liz to know that we needed 2 sheets of paper to type them and to record them on. She has been associated with Yad Vashem for over 15 years. She's also been a tour guide. She went to, and I'm going to mispronounce this, I'm sure, the Betzalel Art School. And I know they have a branch in Haifa, and she went to their Jerusalem campus. And in Israel, if you say you're a graduate of that school, that's like Moore School of Art in Philadelphia. It's the best and the finest. And Liz also worked with IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, in designing art for them. And our theme today is using art to teach about the Holocaust. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Liz Elsby. And Morgan, if you give a wave, is going to assist her today. Liz?
Okay. Hi, friends. 1 second. Let me just, technology got the better of me today. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
Yes, we can hear you, Liz. You're good.
Wonderful. Okay, so hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here today. I'm just getting my PowerPoint up, and I'm going to have to apologize beforehand because my neighbor is drilling in the house, and there's a little drilling going on. So I'm just going to cover up the drilling by doing this. Okay, wonderful. And if we can kind of make it full screen, or is that good? Okay, friends, so we're going to have a two-part talk today. The first talk is going to be about an hour. I hope the drilling isn't driving everyone nuts. Can you hear me, or you hear the drilling? I might go down and do something to the neighbor in the meantime. Okay, the first part is going to be kind of a general introduction about using art. And I think what's really going to excite a lot of you is when we think Holocaust art, a lot of people think it has to be only drawings from Auschwitz. We're only going to see prisoners, we're only going to see bodies. That is a small part of the art that was produced during the Holocaust. It's actually a very tiny part. And I'd like to teach you a way that you can use art as a first-person narrative and also as a first-person, as a historical source. So I'm going to go to the first slide. Oh, and the second part of the day, by the way, is going to be a whole example how to use art to tell the story of an entire place. We're going to take a trip to Theresienstadt without using a single picture, without using a single photograph. And I'm going to give you a picture of what that ghetto was actually like. Again, without photographs, through the medium of art. And most of the artists we're going to talk about today did not survive. For me, it's always really important that we show the work of people who didn't survive as well, because it's their tombstone. It's their memory. It's all that remains from them. And for me, every time I do this, even though sometimes we have a little technical problems, it's giving them life again. It's giving them a tombstone, and it's giving them memory. And I think that you'll understand that when you use this in your classroom. So when we teach about the Holocaust, there's a tendency to kind of fall into a litany of dates and facts and, and kind of dry historical narratives. The historical, by its nature, says Aaron Appelfeld, tends to accent the unfolding of events while indicating social and political trends. Art, on the other hand, has always sought out the individual and his inner world, and from that, it tries to understand the outside world. And you'll see those of you who are using echoes and reflections to tell a human story, to tell the story of the individual, is what we seek to do when we teach the Holocaust. We have to teach the history, but without the individual story, without understanding what it meant to real human beings, the other just becomes a litany of lists, of numbers, and your students will kind of block it out after a while. So that's one of the rationales of using art. And I know some of you may be saying, oh, I don't know how to use art, I don't know how to draw, I don't like going to art museums, I have no connection with art. I'm going to change that for you today. Because the artwork we're going to see was not some intellectual exercise to be put into the Metropolitan Museum of, or the Modern Museum or Contemporary. And art that also shows that despite everything, human beings can still see the beauty in the world. So we're going to go to the next slide, please, Morgan. And what is Holocaust art? The definition we use at Yadam is any artwork produced from 1933, the years the Nazis come to power, till about 1948. And some of you may be saying, wait, what? Liberated January 45. It takes survivors years after the Holocaust to get back on their feet again, to come to some kind of terms with the fact that most of them were alone and had lost their families. So it's these 3 years of kind of rebuilding their lives somehow that we also consider part of the scope of Holocaust art. Holocaust art is different than regular art. You can walk into the Met and see a gorgeous painting and go, wow, that's Picasso. I love it, and not know too much about the artist. For Holocaust art, you first of all need to know why we consider that art Holocaust art. To know how it was found, and we don't know any of those things. Sometimes people bring a piece of art from Yad Vashem that their mother gave them, and she's a survivor of this camp, and we just have the art and we don't know any of it. But to tell us artists and not a regular artist is part of the how we discover this. So we're going to start with this following drawing. Morgan, thank you. Painting. Next. Thanks. And the artist's name is Felix Nussbaum. And the artwork I'm going to show you is called The Refugee. Now, if we just look at it, and soon we'll talk about how do we look at a piece of artwork, how do we make it accessible for your students, and how through artwork, your students can really like find all kinds of meaning to the text and the numbers and the history you've been teaching them. Let me give you the story of Felix Nussbaum. Felix Nussbaum was an up-and-coming artist from Osnabrück, Germany. He was born in 1904, really making a name for himself as a German artist who happened to be Jewish. He was so talented that he is sent to study in Italy in the early 1930s. And there he is in the beautiful sunshine, painting and drawing, and he meets a nice Jewish girl called Felka Platek, and life is roses. And in January 1933, what happens? The Nazis come to power. He makes a very sad discovery. In the eyes of the Nazis, and soon in the eyes of his countrymen, his colleagues, Felix is no longer a German. Now he is a Jew who is not wanted anywhere. And he goes into the self-imposed exile. First he goes to Italy, stays in Italy, and then he goes to Belgium. And eventually, he's caught. Once the Nazis take over, he's caught around 1943. He's sent to a camp called Saint-Cyprien in the south of France. He manages to escape from that camp, goes back into hiding. At this point, he's in hiding with his wife, and it's his artwork that gives him away. Because if any of you have ever painted with oils, they're smelly. You have to use linseed oil, you have to use turpentine, it's stinky, it's smelly. He's hiding, but he can't stop painting. And one of the neighbors smells, these very small smells of, strong smells of art supplies. The Gestapo is alerted. He and his wife, Felka, were arrested. They were sent to Auschwitz. And this brilliant artist dies, is murdered in 1944 along with his wife. Here he shows us, what does it mean to be a refugee? What does it mean to be a man who has no place to go? A man who is no longer seen as a viable human being. And this painting, which he paints in 1939, let's look at it together. And this is something you will talk about with students. First of all, artists use colors to express what they're feeling and the tone, to set the tone and the setting of a painting. So what colors are we using here? What colors do you see? That's going to either type it into the things. I'm going to guess most of you are going to say brown, very somber, right? Brown, somber colors. The artist takes you right into the picture, into this room that seems bleak and hopeless. And this table that has a very, I see Randy is saying earth tones. Notice the table has this very sharp point, and that seems to be going into the head of this figure who is kind of a portrait of Felix. The world outside is bright with life, Ellen says. Thank you, Ellen. By the way, guys, there is no right or wrong way to look at a piece of art. I can tell you as an artist, I put it out there, and however people interpret it, even if it's not exactly what I intended, that's fine. That's the beauty of a piece of art. So Ellen may have one type of interpretation, and Morgan may have another, but all of that is valid, and make sure your students understand that. We see this figure bent over in despair. His heads are in his hands. We suppose that's Felix himself. And this is a man who has no place to go. The little bundle by his feet is very reminiscent of those of you who saw the movie with Charlie Chaplin, the little vagabond, I forgot the name in English. And someone who has no home in those days would kind of take a big stick and make a little bundle and tie everything on the bundle, and you would wander the world. And this is very reminiscent of the notion of the wandering Jew. The wandering Jew, the Jew who nobody wants, the Jew who has been kicked to pillar to post, the Jew who is homeless. And here he is, the wandering Jew, everything he owns in that little bundle with this menacing table. Friends, look at the globe. What does that globe say to you? Look at the globe. Look how the artist used the shadowing on the globe. Notice it's not realistic, and he doesn't care. He doesn't care that it's not realistic. What does that shadowing say to us? Notice what's in shadow and what the shadow is encroaching. It looks like the world is about to be enveloped in darkness, doesn't it? Europe is shown on the globe, right, Monica? Because this is happening in Europe right now. This is happening, notice it's coming where, near where Germany is. It's enveloping the globe. It's this darkness. And here he is. The globe is menacing him. And I'll talk about how sometimes we use objects, they have a personality. This object has almost its own presence, its own personality. It's menacing, it's hovering over of this figure. Is there any place to go in the room, guys? Can you run away to the corners? Can you flee this scene? And the answer is pretty much no. The only way out is through that door. Now, one of you, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, mentioned that it seemed full of light, right? It seems like some kind of refuge from this room. Well, let's look at it closely. Is there any greenery outside there? Are there any signs of life? And if you notice those two trees, if any of you have ever been to Poland and had the opportunity to go to Jewish cemeteries that still exist in Poland, and even some cemeteries you'll find in the United States that have graves that are kind of from the 19th century, the notion of a tree with the limbs cut off symbolizes a life cut short. And Ellen is also saying the birds can represent life. Very good. There are some students, however, who will see those black birds and say those look like birds of death. To me, it seems like a lifeless landscape. Ellen sees it as birds representing freedom. But whatever it is, it's kind of tantalizingly outside of his grasp, right? Here he is, stuck in this place, menaced by this world in darkness, no place to go. Outside the window is either this bleak landscape that offers no refuge, or as Ellen said, offers some kind of refuge, but he can't get there. And I think for those of you who want to teach about refugees, what does it mean to be a person who has no place to go? And if you are studying Nazi Germany, all of the decrees that are going to lead to this, to the Jews not going anywhere. Barry says the trees are barren, like the trees are dying. Yes, Barry, and that's why they use those as cemeteries, Jewish cemeteries, like a barren tree, no leaves. Sometimes the limbs are cut off, traditionally symbolize death. You can use this picture to illustrate the laws and edicts that the Nazis are passing against the Jews. If you just put up a litany, a laundry list of 1933, this law was passed, 1934, your students can't connect. What does it mean when you take somebody and all of a sudden they're no longer a citizen, they no longer have any rights, no country wants them, there's no place to run away to, they're stuck. And what I love is the same way I'm getting such interesting responses from all of you, because it really does elicit a response. People feel comfortable talking about this picture, and they should do, because that's exactly what Felix wanted. He wanted you to look at this picture. He wanted you to be moved. He wanted you to think, is this freedom? Is this darkness? That's what artwork does for us. So Morgan, we're going to go to the second picture now by the same artist, and we're going to recognize some of the motifs here. And I absolutely love, the shadow goes from inside to part on the outside. Thank you. Look at all these things we're seeing here. And I'm enjoying seeing your commentary also. Okay, here we have a picture Felix makes late. He makes it in 1943, and it's called Self-Portrait. I think it's 43, I can't see the thing. 43, 44, it's blocked in the bottom, and it says Self-Portrait with Identity Card. Now, we're seeing some of the same motifs we saw in the first piece of artwork. What are some of those motifs, guys? Let's look at them together. Do we see the wall with the corner? Yes. Do we see that same tree? Now we get a real close-up, this kind of dead tree. Yes. Let's look at the portrait here. And I could tell you as an artist, and those of you who create art, when you make a portrait, the eyes, when I draw my eyes on my drawings, the eyes kind of capture you. They have a dialogue with you. Either they capture you or you're not allowed into the eyes. But eyes are a very important element. They either invite you into like the soul of the subject, or they can push you away. Here the eyes are inviting us in. And the question I always ask myself when I see this piece of work is, who am I, the viewer, to Felix Nussbaum? Am I the Gestapo? Am I a fellow Jew in the same situation? Am I a bystander, someone who seems to have just stumbled upon the scene? Ellen is noticing the tree. The tree seems to have shorter limbs. He's in the ghetto. Thank you, Ellen. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Wonderful. But here we are. We're part of this almost conspiratorial little scene. He's got his Jewish star there. He's kind of lifting up his collar so we can see his face. We see his ID card. He's in Belgium, the part of Belgium that was was Flemish Belgium, and he's looking at us and the corner, and there's no place to run away to. Now, Ellen, let's look at that tree. The Jews in Belgium were not in a ghetto. They were deported. 1942, they started to deport them to Auschwitz. The ghettoization usually happened in the East. It happens in Poland. It happens in the countries in the East, with the exception of Theresienstadt, which we'll talk about after. But your observation of the tree, I think, was spot on. Because again, now we really see this is a tree that's not going to blossom. The limbs are cut off, it's dead. And yet, does everyone see what's to the left of the tree? What is to the left of that tree, everybody? Do you see blossoms? Now we know, your students know, that Felix Nussbaum was murdered in the gas chambers of Auschwitz. Thank you, Randy, in 1944. He didn't know that. He didn't know he was going to be murdered. And inside of everyone's heart, as Andy said, there's hope. And Ellen Bernstein is saying, life is nearby. Life is going on over that fence. He's just not part of it. And so there's this little glimmer of hope. And you'll hear this again and again from survivors. It's like they'll say, hope is the last to die. To the very end, we hope some miracle would happen. We hope that humanity would prevail. We hope that the rumors that they were gassing children were just that, were just rumors. So we see this little glimpse of hope. There are the same birds we saw in the first work. Does everyone see them? Again, Ellen thought they were kind of birds of hope. Someone else thought they were birds of carrion, of crows. And we see outside here a telegraph wire, but nobody is talking, nobody is sending for hope, for help. They're kind of cut off. And who do you think is in that window? That window is very intriguing. Remember, there's no right and wrong. Felix Nussbaum didn't leave a list. You can only see this artwork this way. If you don't see it this way, then you're wrong. Who do you think might be looking out that window? We've heard of the notions of the bystanders, yes? People who saw it and didn't get involved. Maybe peeking out of that window is someone watching and not doing anything. Onlookers, very good. Onlookers, bystanders, people not getting involved. Someone willing to hide someone. It could also be, Ellen has a very light, I love her interpretation. It could also be someone is hiding Jews. And Kristen Ward thinks perhaps it's other Jews. Perhaps it's also the hiding place where he and his wife were hiding, which is now discovered. And we'll remember that shortly, and can elicit from us how much we get involved in this one drawing. Now we can see it, and they were in hiding, and it was scary, and from there they were taken and sent to Auschwitz. What does it mean from the first person narrative? Looks welcoming amidst the dark. Wow, Ellen, I love it. I love your interpretations. So you can use this also. We can use the written word. This is like text. This is a first person narrative of a murdered Jewish person. This is his, when you teach the subject, don't just teach, the laundry list with teach this. What does it mean to be a human being? Now, if some of you are saying, wow, I love Felix Nussbaum, where can I find his work? If you go to the Book Museum, which is in Osnabrück, Germany, last time I checked, they did something phenomenal. he made, I think, 140 drawings. Don't quote me on the number. Paintings, Hawaiian hiding. It's incredible. And they had put all of them online. And I know that drawing this one, for example, a few years ago, I right-clicked on it, I saved it, and I'm using it. Please go and you can find this to use by yourself with your students. His drawings, you could see his poor man's mind unraveling. His mind begins to unravel. He's in hiding. He's terrified. He doesn't, it's Ozna. And a lot of his work is portraits. And the last work, yes, Michelle, yes, the artwork is all there. And Osnabrück, I'm going to actually send it out to you. I'm going to send a little list out, and you'll have that by tomorrow. Okay, so all the participants will get the thing. Okay, Morgan, we are going to continue. And I'm going to show you another, again, for those who are teaching how does it happen? You can't teach the Holocaust without dedicating some time to the rise of Nazism, the rise of ideology. How does this happen? How do people let themselves be? And what does it mean to be a Jew living in Germany when all of this is happening? So on Echoes Reflections, we have a wonderful unit. What does it mean to be a Jew in Nazi Germany? We have all of the information about the Nazis coming to power. But I want to illustrate the copies of both these are displayed at the Museum. Jewish Heritage is part of the Auschwitz. Yes, okay. Very good. Thank you for a person who put that on. I want to share from Charlotte Solomon. And it's an amazing story, especially for those of you who teach teenagers, because it's a story that's so personal, so filled with teenage angst, a woman's angst. It's so real. And it's from an artist. And next slide. Thanks, Morgan. Next slide, please, Morgan. Next one. Morgan. Thank you. Here she is, another portrait, also guarding us suspiciously. This young woman was born in Germany, in Berlin. Yep. Okay, go back one, in Berlin. Yep, we're going a little further. And she's born in Berlin, to a very kind of prominent Jewish family at the time. Yeah, we could stop there. You can see pictures of her. She comes from a family that would have had a very sad history had there not been the Holocaust. The family was plagued by mental illness on her mother's side. I think it's 7 members of her mother's maternal family committed suicide, including her mother and her aunts. Those didn't say mama killed herself. She was told her mother got sick and died overnight. So she had this hole in her heart. Her father, who was a very prominent surgeon, remarries a Jewish opera singer whose father had brings Judaism and life back into the house. When the Nazis come to power in 1933, Charlotte is 16 years old and her world falls apart. If you're teaching the steps to Nazification, if you're teaching the steps, what happens to the Jews year by year, 1933, we see it through her artwork, and I'll show you examples in a minute. Her mother and father are no longer allowed to practice their professions. Her father, I'll show you, can no longer be a doctor. Her mother, mid-song, is kicked off the stage as an opera singer. Yes, so stopped it. Can't start my video. Can you put my video back on, please? Hello?
So Liz, we halted your video just for a second, just because the audio is breaking up. Is it okay if we leave the video off for now, and then when we go back to
Fabulous
questions, we can put the video back on for you?
That's great.
Is that okay?
That's great.
Okay, thank you.
That works perfectly. Okay, so her father can no longer be an opera doctor. Her mother can no longer teach, sing opera. Her whole world begins to fall apart. She has a tragic kind of one-sided unrequited love affair with a man who comes as a voice coach for her mother. And in 1938, after Kristallnacht, her father had been arrested. He comes back after being in the concentration camp for about 3 weeks, and he says, "We have to leave." It's gut-wrenching. This is a man, we'll see in a minute, who's part of Germany. He served in the German army. These are Germans who happen to be Jewish. And in 1938, not one country in Europe would take an entire Jewish family. So her grandparents leave early. They go to the south of France to live with kind of this kind of eccentric American woman called Ottilie Moore. And her parents, seeing this very fragile young woman who's always kind of on the verge of some kind of depression, she's sent to the south of France to Nice to be with Ottilie Moore and her grandparents, and the parents take refuge in Holland. And it's there in Villefranche she meets she discovers that her mother has committed suicide. How does she discover it? We'll see in the artwork. I'll show you in a minute. To cut a very sad and long story short, she falls in love or has an affair with a Jewish gardener, a fellow refugee called Arthur Nagel. She gets pregnant, and he registers the couple in the town hall of Nice. He registers this couple. And it's there in Nazi-occupied France, in Italian occupied Nazis take over in 1943. They say those Italians, they were too lax. We need to start to round up the Jews around here. We need to do the work they didn't do. And they don't even need to look for this couple. All they do is they find their name listed in this registry book in the town hall in Nice. And the couple is arrested from their villa. They're taken to Drancy, which is the transit camp in Paris. And from there, she was sent to Auschwitz-Birkenau. She was 26 years old. She was 26, I forgot. Let's look at her artwork now. Okay, Morgan, next. Because in that brief interlude, when she's kind of tottering between thoughts of suicide, when she finds out that her mother committed suicide in 1942 and 43, she takes a year and creates one of the most incredible art projects of the 20th century. Yes.
I'm sorry, you just broke up a bit.
I hear you, Morgan.
You hear? You broke up a little bit at the end when you after you said her age, what happened to her. Could you just repeat that for everyone?
Yeah, she was murdered at the age of 26. She was 5 months pregnant, and she was murdered in Auschwitz upon arrival. Pregnant Jewish women had no chance whatsoever, most of them upon arrival. There's a handful that may have been discovered or may have been able to hide their pregnancies. If they were pregnant on the ramp at Auschwitz, they were murdered immediately. Okay, she makes this incredible, one of the most amazing art projects of the 20th century. It's over 700 drawings of her life as if it was called Charlotte Life or Theater, a Singspiel, a light opera. So Morgan, if you can go to the next one. And first of all, this is so relatable for your students. Now let's look at this picture. This shows her father and mother getting married. Show this to your students and tell them what type of citizens were these Jewish people. And what can you tell from this drawing that she makes in 1943? Does everyone see the father on the right? Father is in his World War I uniform. Over 12,000 Jews died defending Germany in World War I. That's right. Very proud of their being part of Germany. 12,000 Jews died. Adolf Hitler's lieutenant was a Jewish man called Hugo Gutmann. They are German who happen to be Jewish. Next. A little bit, Stephen. The colors, she's kind of even in her own world. At this point, Marc Chagall, I'm not sure how much she knew about Marc Chagall at that point. She's this more influenced by German expressionism, but it's this wonderful style that she kind of develops by herself. And you'll see it's almost like comics. When you show this to people and you see it, it's like one big graphic novel. Here, like many German Jews, even though they were Jewish and even though they practiced Judaism, Many German Jews were culturally Jewish. I know, it's amazing style. Isn't it beautiful, Stephen? Were culturally German, which means culturally they may have had a Christmas tree. They didn't go to church. They didn't believe in Christianity, but it was part of German culture. So here we see the Christmas tree, part of German culture. Very different than Jews from Poland, by the way. Next. Morgan? Okay. The Nazis come to power in 1933, and she begins to record it. Now, you could tell your students, January 30th, 1933, she's witnessing it. And she's not witnessing it as one of the people who is part of this. She's witnessing this as the enemy. She's witnessing this as what the Nazi state has declared. As, you know, this is anti-Semitism is part of the fiber of the Nazi state. And if you show this to your students, and here she is seeing this from the window. What do all of those soldiers look like? Do they all kind of look like Hitler? Is there any individuality here? Is there any way to get yourself in? No, it's like this wedge. And look at the composition here. Half of it is these soldiers marching together with that banner. January 30th, 1933. Disaster is coming. Next. Morgan? Great. In the streets, copies of the Stürmer begin to appear. Now, if you're talking about how do you get people on board, how do you get people involved to be actively anti-Semitic, the Stürmer was an incredibly anti-Semitic newspaper, less intellectual than the Beobachter, which was also a Nazi newspaper. This one is aimed at the common man. It's filled with really pornographic drawings of Jewish, horrible, monstrous men kind of leering over young, attractive German women. And what they do is very intelligent. Today, we would kind of bombard social media. They didn't have social media in those days. So they set up these windows all over Germany, and they would put copies of the Stürmer up once a week. So if you're going on the train, if you're going to the park, if you're going out to have a beer, you see these windows and this terrible message. And take a look here. Look how big that window is, that display window of the Stürmer. Yeah, it is kind of like a dark cult. It's like, how do you get people involved? You have all of these people circling, looking at that. Look what's going on in the background. They are painting swastikas on Jewish shops. People are running all over. This probably depicts the boycott of April 1st, 1933. It says it right there. But let me show you a photograph. Next one, Morgan. Next.
I think there's just a little bit of a lag on your end. It's showing for us. You see it?
Okay. No, not yet. But you should be seeing a black and white photograph. Yes. This is exactly what it looks like. It says in German, with the Stürmer, we're against Judah, we're against the Jews. And it says that famous slogan, the Juden sind uns so Unglück, the Jews are our misfortune, our undoing. Look at the guy on the left with the apron. He may just be your average Joe. He may not feel too strongly about the Jews one way or the other. He's probably never met a Jew, because only about 500,000 Jewish people lived in Germany. They weren't even 1% of the population in 1933. But all these guys next to him, that's right. All these guys next to him are saying, yeah, that's right. Look at those Jews. What do you think he's going to start to do after a while? He's probably going to agree with them. Probably wants to be part of this. One nation, one Reich, one Führer. That means kind of being on board. Culture, hardly ever mentioned in pre-war life for Jews. Let's talk religion, work. Good. Okay. Anyway, so we see it from the Nazi point of view, but we see it from her point of view. How painful was that? How scary was that? To be a Jewish teenager, to be a Jewish kid, and all of that's going on. And all of a sudden, people who are your friends and neighbors are looking at this junk, and all of a sudden you're the enemy. When we see her artwork, we understand how this feels. Next. Okay, I'm sure there's a little lag because I can't see it yet. But I suppose it's the picture next. You just tell me which one is there. We go. So her father is told he can no longer practice being a surgeon. Next. And if it's her mother being booed off the set. No, here she is telling her father in 1933, I don't want to go back to school. All the teachers are wearing swastikas. I'm being persecuted because I'm Jewish. No way. 1933, they didn't have the insight we had. Nobody said, well, it's all going to end in Auschwitz, so you shouldn't go back to school. Her father says, you know what? Go back and do your exams. And I think students sometimes think people in 1933 knew what was going to happen. Even the Nazis didn't know in 1933 that Auschwitz was going to start functioning as a death camp in 1942. The first death camp, Chelmno, doesn't start to function until December 8th, 1941. So they're kind of in the dark. They don't know yet. This is developing. So it's very kind of natural response. Well, you know, things will blow over. Well, this government won't last. Let's go back to school. Next. There. She gets accepted to art school, and this is such a beautiful drawing. This is a dream of her life. She's in art school, she's drawing, and if any of you are artists, I went to art school here. You know, the whole beauty of being an art student and arty-farty and the drawing and all that stuff, living the life of an artist. And then, next. Next.
It should be there.
Okay, great. Here is life drawing class. Friends, look around, look closely at the drawing. What's beginning to happen in the kind of sacred halls of the art school where, you know, you're allowed to be whatever, you're allowed to be gay, you're allowed to be crazy, and what do we start seeing here? Look at the two figures on the right. What are they wearing? You see that they're wearing uniforms. Ellen touched something and she can't see the artwork, so if someone can tell her what to do. There's two figures already wearing the brown shirts, wearing the uniforms of the SA. She's after 1934, would be the stormtroopers. Anyway, so it's now encroached in art school. She has to leave art school. Next. Okay, has it changed to the next one?
Yeah, it's the street.
This is Kristallnacht, if you're teaching about November 9th and 10th of November, Kristallnacht, all of this craziness. Jews are, you know, people are taking to the streets, attacking Jews. Her father is arrested. She's watching it from the window. It's terrifying. It's terrifying. Her father's been arrested. Next. And I can't see it yet, but wonderful. Ellen is back. Okay, next. Wait. Has it changed, Morgan, to the next one? Yes. She makes a heartbreaking decision, and I want you to talk about this with your students, because some of you may have students who had to leave their country to come to the United States as refugees. What does it mean when you have to leave the country of your birth? The country where you speak the language, the country where every street and every building is familiar to you, the country that you had citizenship to, no longer have, the country that you had a regular passport for. What does that mean? And here she is saying goodbye as she writes to her homeland, to Germany, forever. From there she goes to the south of France. And for her, it's kind of like a lightning. She's in the south of France. The Nazis aren't there. It's beautiful. It's sunny. She gets a respite from the horror. Next. But her grandmother starts to listen to the radio. And I think it's something we can all relate to in these Corona days. You know, at the beginning, everyone was glued to the TV and wanted information every second. In those days, you got it from the radio. Her grandmother hears what's happening to the Jews in Germany. She hears that Hitler has invaded Poland, and her grandmother commits suicide. That's the catalyst. Her grandfather tells her, what are you so upset about? Your mother committed suicide also. That's when she creates this incredible work. Do you notice how much looser the artwork is now? Do you notice how the first drawings I showed you were very tight, and now it's becoming much more loose and much more of a stream of consciousness as she's painting? Next. And it says here, I believe in life. Life is beautiful. You know, what's we call it? I'm not translating exactly. And the last one is she writes, "Dear God," next, "please don't let me lose my mind." Look at the difference between this piece of work, which is one of the last ones in Life or Theater, and those first drawings I showed you. Shortly after this, she was caught, sent to Drancy, from there Auschwitz-Birkenau, and murdered. And if you go to the next little slide, you can see this is her Stolpersteine from Berlin, and it says from here she went to France, fled to France, and she was caught, put into ghouls. From there she was sent to Drancy and then murdered in Auschwitz. Okay, for those of you who would like to use this incredible material, the Jewish Museum of Amsterdam, which owns the entire work, the parents donated it to that museum, very graciously not only put up most of her 700 drawings, but created it almost the way it was supposed to be seen. There's an actress reading the streams of consciousness of things she wrote. There are notes. There is music, because as she was writing this incredible work, she's humming music to herself, and she puts musical notes on it. So where there's a little bit of opera, the Jewish Museum of Amsterdam has actually put that on. So, you know, grab a cup of coffee, grab a few hankies, sit in front of your computer for 4 hours and see Life or Theater, Charlotte Salomon. It's amazing. You could have your students look and write about her. She's such an incredible opportunity to illustrate everything they're learning about the Nazis coming to power and what it meant to be a young Jewish person then. Okay, we're gonna go on to our next artist. Okay, and his name is Bedřich Friedta. I'm gonna do a whole talk about Theresienstadt very soon. So we're going to talk about Theresienstadt itself in a minute, but Bedřich Friedta was one of the artists who was forced to make artwork for the Nazis in that camp, and I'll give you all the background in the second talk. And if you go to the next one, Morgan, he wants to show the horrors of the camp, and here we see the deportations, Jews waiting to be deported to Poland. And look at the method here. Those of you who are familiar with the Renaissance technique, excuse my terrible pronunciation, of chiaroscuro, of dark and light. Do you see any of the faces of these poor people who are being deported? You do, but they're kind of in shadow. It's glaring, it's terrifying. These poor people are being sent away to be deported. This is artwork that is going to be created to show the world the horrors of the ghetto. Next. Bedřich Friedta wants us, the audience, 80 years later, to say, this is what I was reduced to. I was an art slave. I was forced to make art for the Nazis. He never actually used a pickaxe. Pen and ink, yes, pen, ink, and washes, Randy. Pen ink, you know how you make a wash? You take the ink and you kind of dilute it and you use it the same way you would use watercolors. It's called a wash. So yes, very good. How did he get the materials? People always ask me. We'll talk about in the next talk. The Nazis create what's called the technical studio in Theresienstadt, where Jews are forced to create artwork for them. And I'll show you the next lecture. I hope will be very interesting, showing us that. And they're able to steal pen and paper to show the horrors of the ghetto, to do this act of resistance, to show this is what's really going on here. This is for us. This is for the outside world. This is what they wanted us to see. He had his own private world too, because he didn't arrive in this terrible place by himself. Bedřich Friedta arrives with his wife and his little boy, Tomi Friedta. Tomi is a toddler when he arrives in the camp. I have a very dear friend who knew Tomi in Prague after the war. And the Jewish historian, okay, thank you, Irvin. She knew Tomi after the war. Tomi is about 7 months old when he arrives. He's never walked on grass. He's never held a puppy. He doesn't know what a full tummy of food feels like. He doesn't know what the freedom to go to the movies or go to the zoo or go to all these freedoms that we enjoy and want to give our children. He doesn't know anything about any of that. All he knows is the ghetto. So for his 3rd birthday, his father wants to make him a present. Next. And he creates this amazing book for him called Ford Told Me on his 3rd birthday in Tel Aviv. First of all, look at that drawing. Every time I see that little tush, I want to give it a little squeeze. That's Told Me looking out the window. Some of the same motifs, by the way, that we saw from Felix Nussbaum, the bird, the tree. I think Ellen was talking about them symbolizing freedom, and here they really do. If anyone has ever visited Auschwitz-Birkenau and gone to Auschwitz I, the museum, you have seen the stacks of suitcases, very similar to suitcases like this. Told Me looking at freedom. Next. Gail, I can't hear you if you're talking. I'm sorry, you're on mute, Gail.
She's talking to Irvin.
Gail's on mute.
Oh, yeah, no, she's talking to Irvin, sorry. Good.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, okay, very good. I thought you were talking to us. All right, look at this. In the ghetto, there are trains leaving back and forth, taking people to be murdered. And in the book, he writes to his little boy, he says, you know, those trains we see in the ghetto, we'll probably get on those trains too, but our train's gonna take us somewhere wonderful. A place where there's trees and flowers and freedom. And what is my little boy gonna do when he gets there? Next. My little boy could become an engineer. Next. There was one that says my little boy could become a boxer, he could become a detective. Just don't become a general, he tells him. His parents write, we can't wait to bring the little girl you'll bring home to us one day. And the last picture here from the book says, this book is one of many that you will be receiving over the years. And his poor father, Bedřich Frita, was arrested in July 1944 for what the Nazis called the artist plot. 4 artists were arrested for making horror propaganda against the Nazis. They were eventually sent. He was sent to Auschwitz. He dies at Auschwitz of probably tuberculosis, some kind of disease. Only one of the artists survives. Little Tommy manages to survive. And if you go to the next one, if we saw the picture, the portrait that he made for us, this is the portrait he makes for his little boy, his daddy. And I think I have the next one, the 2 of them together. If you could do that one. That together. I'm supposing it's on, Morgan, the next one? Yes. So the left is the art slave for us. Remember, this is what Tel Aviv was like. This is what they reduced us to. But we stood up the only way we could through our artwork. And on the right, Daddy, private, only for his little boy, crying and laughing. Life, you know, all the parts of life coming together. This book, Told Me, is excellent for those who are teaching younger children. Yad Vashem actually has a little workbook that goes with it. Notice that I haven't showed you any bodies. I haven't showed you anyone in striped uniforms dying in the gas chamber. And yet we're understanding these people as human beings, like us, with human emotions, who are being put through horrific tests, and it's showing us through their artwork.
Liz,
Okay, I think,
Liz,
yes.
I can say a couple comments because, first of all, I've used this book, and I want to add to what you said that, first of all, I just put in the chat that the book is available on the Yad Vashem website to purchase. And that's where I got my book. And I've used it with 5th graders as well as for university students. So obviously, you know, you change your approach and the way you're using it to the grade level, but I've used it for all of those levels. But you also mentioned Theresienstadt, or some of us say Terezin. And we have several historians again with us this morning. One of them is Dr. Michael Hayes, and I asked him if he could just speak a few moments, because we all know when you mention Auschwitz-Birkenau, we knew just what you were talking about, but many of us don't know Theresienstadt. So I wonder if you could unmute Dr. Michael Hayes.
One second, Gail, I'm doing a whole second talk about Theresienstadt. Only about Theresienstadt. That's going to come in about 10 minutes.
Okay, so then
that's why I didn't go in too much.
Okay.
We're going to do the whole thing. And then if Dr. Hayes wants to jump in, I would be thrilled.
Okay,
thrilled.
that sounds great. Okay, good. So it's all good. Thank you.
All good, because Theresienstadt deserves its own hour and a half, especially the artists, and especially seeing it through the eyes of the artists. Okay, what I think I'm going to do one more artist, Morgan. So if we go down, I think we're going to go down near the end. Thank you. I'll tell you when to stop.
Liz, what's the name of the artist? I can just skip right through.
If it's towards the end, I think we're going to talk about Yehuda Bakon.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yehuda Bakon. Because it also, and you know, I'd love to have another talk about all these other works, because really 3 hours isn't enough once you get me started with art.
Here we are.
Okay. You'll see there's one more thing. If anyone's ever met Yehuda Bakon, sweet little man. He comes up to like my shoulder, a little teeny weeny guy. Still lives in Jerusalem. Kinahara. He should live to be 120. I'm going to show you two contrasting drawings by this one kid. And I want to show you two concepts. This is a drawing. First of all, Yehuda Bakon is from Ostrava in Czech Republic. And we'll talk again. Theresienstadt is on its way. He is sent to Theresienstadt, the Terezin, which I'll call Theresienstadt, the roster of artists that are on the slideshow. Yes, Amy, I will. And I will also send you a whole bunch of extra information. And I'll show you where you can find pictures and sources. And please use it. You know, it's giving them life again. This is their epitaph. This is their, anyway, to cut his very sad long story short, family camp of Theresienstadt, which we'll talk about in the next lecture. And his, for some reason that historians, we don't know exactly why, 89 young boys were chosen in July 1944, before they liquidated this little camp, which we'll talk about in a minute, which is actually in the middle of Auschwitz-Birkenau, were chosen to be taken out of the camp and put into the camp next door, which was the, whatchamacallit, company, the Strafkommando, the punishment brigade. And they're put into a building there. And from there, they, in other words, they have to put a wheelbarrow or a wagon all over the camp. They have to collect the ashes from the gas chambers. He remembers on winter mornings ashes of murdered people. These young boys had to strew these ashes on what's called the Lagerstrasse, the camp street, so that the cars wouldn't slip on the streets. The members of the Sonderkommando, the guys who were forced to burn the bodies, took pity on these thin, emaciated young kids. And when the gas chamber, and he specifically remembers one case when the children tried to come in and they were told, you can't come in right now, it's going to be used soon. Survives this horror, survives a death march, survives, he's liberated in one of the subcamps of what we call it, of subcamp of Majdanek, Guskirchen, I think, comes back to Prague. He's a kid who has no soul left. He's dead inside. Everything he loved, everything he knew, all his faith in what humanity is, his trust has been destroyed. First things he draws when he's well enough to actually pick up utensils is this drawing of his father. Now let's look at the drawing together, everybody. What is his state of mind as he makes the drawing? Look at the go back in, and the father coming out of the chimney. Are we back? Because I'm forward.
There you go. Sorry about that.
Okay. Coming, I guess, like out of the chimney of the gas chamber. Notice saving his dad, right? Randy, could he actually save his dad? No, his father is murdered. The smoke comes out. But what Randy said is something I think very significant. And this is also the power of art. He put onto a piece of paper something tangible, something tangible. And here's his father rising out of the chimney. Remember I talked about the eyes when we draw a portrait. Are those eyes engaging with us? No, they're kind of looking off. Notice the strokes. He's agitated. He's not wanting to draw every little detail. He wants to capture that one little moment of remembrance of his father coming out of smoke. And I don't know if you can see it here because of the positioning. I can't see it because there's a little bar in front of it. On the lower left is a stick figure leaning on the fence. And one of the last memories, thank you, Morgan, one of the last memories he has of his dad is as these 89 kids are being taken out of this section, this family camp, which was one of the, when you go to Auschwitz-Birkenau, it's on the right-hand side. The camp is divided into different mini camps, sub-camps. As he's taken out, the families are next to the fence, and they're shouting out encouragement to the children. Just try and live. Tell the world, trying to give them objects that might help him. And his father offers his little boy his gold teeth. Now, this is fascinating because in his memoirs of the 1980s, Yuda Bakon says flat out, my father offered me his gold teeth. In the memoir he gave, the talk he gave a few years ago at the Yad Vashem, his memory had changed, and he said, my father offered me bread. As a younger man, the fact that his father would have ripped his teeth out to give to him his gold teeth was something very, I think as a man at his age now, it was too painful. So he remembers now as giving him bread. So here we have Yuda Bakon, this angry, half-dead kid, comes to Prague, and that's where he meets a saint. Next. And I'm going to end this with this uplifting picture, because what he meets is a guy called Przemysl Pitzer, who is a Czech Christian, and a Czech Christian who says it's not enough to be Christian and go to church once a week. Tree? I didn't understand the question, Chris. What tree? Oh, the tree. Gotcha. We're going to get to that tree. Maybe, Ellen. Yes, definitely. But it's very painful to know that your father would take his gold teeth out. That's why he wanted to give it to him, so that he could, you know, bribe the guards, buy bread, whatever. But in his memory, he changed it over the years. Okay, so in a minute.
Did she say next?
No, I didn't say next.
Sorry, thank you.
That's okay. That's how you should treat them. And after the war, there is this terrible situation in Prague, because Prague actually had an uprising at the very end of the war in May 19, last for a few days. And the Czech people are so enraged at the Germans who had taken over their countries and had treated them so badly that a lot of German people are murdered. And what's left are a lot of kids wandering the streets. And Przemysl Pitzer was orphanage, very worse Polish, you treat children and give them all kinds of rights in Prague. He starts to gather these.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Your audio just broke up. Your audio broke up a bit in that last section. Would you mind repeating that?
Okay. Not at all. Przemysl Pitzer had opened up an orphanage after World War I for children who had, you know, whose families couldn't afford to feed them anymore, who had lost a field, and it gives them an excellent education. And after the war, the streets of Prague are filled with these German kids whose parents have been murdered. They're filled with Czech kids who no longer have families. There's Jewish kids who have no place to go. And he begins to gather them up. They make a whole rehabilitation plan, sending them to castles around Prague where they can rehabilitate these children. And there's people who say, wait a minute, are you nuts? You've got Jewish kids, you've got Czech kids, and you've got German kids. You have the children of our enemies. Why are you doing that? And he says something like, if we ever want to not have a war again, if we ever want men to truly love each other, we have to take all these children and have them see each other as human beings and teach them to love again. And it's through the power and the warmth and the sheer goodness of this man that he takes his half-dead little soul and he brings him back to life. And that's what we're seeing from the hand of a 16-year-old kid who a few months before had been in Guska, had been in these camps. I'll talk about the tree in a minute. I haven't gotten to the tree yet. Here we see his dead self. Does everyone see like the dead self on the right? And we see him being led towards the light by this gold Auschwitz-Birkenau. You can see the gas chamber. And the tree, as one of you wrote, symbolizes life. His name is Przemysl Pitter, Paul, and I'm going to send you a link. And there was also an excellent article about him from Prague Radio, did a two-part series about him. And he is recognized as a righteous among the nations at Yad Vashem, which we'll get to in a minute, leading him to the light. Now, if anyone has been to Prague, there's no palm trees in Prague. If anyone's been to Warsaw, there's only one palm tree in Warsaw, and it's on Yerushalayim Street, and it's a big plastic palm tree. There's no palm trees in Prague. But shortly after the war, he was able to come to Jerusalem, where he lives till this day. But I think the most beautiful thing about this drawing, title, and the title in Czech translates to something like, for the man who restored my faith in humanity. And that's what righteous among the nations, righteous people do for us. If most of the world was silent, if most of the world did nothing, if most people either participated or just did nothing, it's those very few. Yad Vashem honors about 27,000 of these righteous people that help restore our faith in humanity. You can't just teach about righteous people. If you're talking about the Holocaust, you can't just talk about Oskar Schindler. You have to teach the whole thing. But you can't not teach and not talk about righteous people. And this beautiful piece of artwork created by the same little boy who made this father coming out of the chimney, that he's able to find faith in humanity again because of one person's goodness. Yes. Is always gives me chills every time I see it. So when we're teaching students, we have to give them the history with their drawings. We have to set the background. I'm going to give you a whole example of how to use these in a whole unit when we talk about Theresienstadt. And we also have to put in a little bit of the hope. So almost all of the artwork I've shown you is easy to find online. I wanted to use examples that you could find online that you can set your students to. I think that there's a lot to be discovered online. I know some of you may be teaching virtually. You may not be actually physically in the classroom right now. Leading to the promised land, exactly. And you know what? You can interpret it. It's beautiful to interpret it. And it always fills me with hope. And I think your students, if they see this, it also, you could teach about righteous among the nations, but if you show a drawing like this, it elevates it. It becomes the story of the individual. So how do you use this in the classroom? Use that as a whole method, a whole model, how you can use artwork to tell a story and how you can get students involved, finding parts of that story to create a whole.
Share with you what I do with art with my students. Oftentimes when I am introducing an historical event such as the SS St. Louis, which my students really relate to that story, I give them a artist rendering, something called the St. Louis Blues by Fritz Hirschberger, and I just ask them to look at it. I don't even tell them what we're going to be talking about in class. And I just say, what do you see? And I have them into breakout groups, which I did when we went virtual last semester. And then eventually I get into the concept of what was the SS St. Louis? Why do we often talk about that it's not in our American history books? And are there any links even to today? And this is quickly just about a ship that left Germany after Kristallnacht, which you know it was very difficult to find passage, but they were able to get visas to get to Cuba. And when they arrived in Cuba, their visas were invalidated. I'm making a complex story very short. There were organizations like the Joint Distribution Committee that tried to raise money so that they could have valid visas. It did not work out. And Captain Schroeder, the captain of the ship, went off the coast of Florida, which, as you know, is very close, 45 miles from Cuba, thinking we will send a telegram to President Roosevelt, we'll send a telegram to Eleanor Roosevelt. And the reaction was that they sent out the Coast Guard to make sure no one jumped ship. And eventually the ship went back to Nazi-occupied Europe, and it really depended where you got off the ship if you survived or not. But it's a little over 50% of the people that were on the ship did survive. So that's the story. And we have Randy who's saying technique connections from tight to loose style and medium. I just went out of it by, let's see, it just faded out. Hold on,
Lines,
sorry.
etching, scrapping to washes, blending, overlapping. So,
Right.
you know, let me just say that you're, all you teachers and others, your analysis of art is great. And that I teach a course at Stockton that is called Art of the Holocaust. I also teach a course at Stockton called America in the Holocaust. And so the story of the St. Louis overlaps that way. But students, whether they're, you know, in the 5th grade, in the 8th grade, or in the 14th grade, love to interpret art. And, you know, as Liz said, the beauty of this is there's no wrong answer. And so you do get them involved. And, you know, the choice of artists that she had there, I mean, there were so many artists, but Felix Nussbaum is quintessential. And Yehuda Bacon is phenomenal. And the fact that he's still alive. And there are film clips of these folks, you know, you just Google it and YouTube. And, you know, there are pieces of film that you can show to your kids and say, these people are here. And, you know, I don't want to toot Liz's horn too much because she's back on, but, you know, not only is she an excellent teacher, but as a practicing artist, I think that gives an additional dimension to it. You guys don't have to be practicing artists. Some of you are. You can tell by the interpretation, but this is so apropos. And I'm go on the line by saying not only to the Holocaust, but to other genocides. I know Amy Fagan has done some work that way. And, you know, you want to talk about relevance. I think you can bring relevance into this whole thing by showing the Holocaust art.
Thank you, Steve. And just one last comment is that I know that there's a high school teacher on today who called us yesterday, and I spoke to her, who said, thank you so much, because I'm not in the honors section. I am not in the college bound section where 100% of the students are going to college. I need ways to connect them because some of their reading levels are not on par of the high school level. So this is a way to begin to introduce the topic by using art.
So I would definitely agree with that. You know, in the dual credit program, not everybody is an honor student. We're embarking on an English as a second language program at Woodrow Wilson, and You know, a lot of these kids are special ed kids as well, or at a standard level. And so I, you know, I agree. I think art breeds success, and it's just magnificent.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm very excited.
Liz?
Can everyone hear me now?
Yes, Liz, if you would
Yes.
look in the chat box, and certainly I'm going to ask Mike Hayes, our historian who's on, and Steve Marcus, who's teaches art and the Holocaust, to Alexandra. You are among many that earned A's today because you have an excellent question. And I'd like the three of you to address this before we get into the next section, because
Okay.
this often comes up.
So let me start by saying, in terms of Nazi propaganda in a course on art of the Holocaust, that's extremely important. So you're not only showing the redemptive art, you're not only showing the art of the victims. You need to show, and you need to show that early on, I think, because art is such a powerful tool. They didn't have Twitter, they didn't have, you know, Google, but these things were readily available. And you know, the whole notion of propaganda is extremely important.
Definitely, Steve. And not only that, the aesthetics, art was very much part of the whole Nazi government. I mean, Goebbels takes over culture, takes over music, takes over the film industry.
Hi, Dr. Hayes. Could you comment on the Nazi propaganda?
I could comment on the Nazi propaganda, but it's specifically art. First of all, am I coming through?
Yes.
Okay, good. Because when I teach the Third Reich, I like to contrast sort of the Nazi aesthetic with the sort of avant-garde aesthetic, but then also use some of these sort of much more, you can tell when you do that, the much more intimate, as Liz has shown, right? The very personal and intimate art that's created by Jewish artists, both in the Third Reich before the war, and then of course in the course of the war. Felix Nussbaum again is a classic. I actually was not so familiar with Charlotte Salomon, so I wanted to thank you for that. But the definitely the Nazi aesthetic is so important, especially when you're dealing with artists, because artists are forced in many ways to make all kinds of choices, just like other sort of Jews in various different walks of life, you know, about what are their next steps going to be. So if you are an artist and you are Jewish, then how do you respond, right? Both in terms of your own safety, but also in how you respond with your art, right? Because you get the artists who, I think, flee into their art at a personal level, but there are others who use it in their own way to sort of counter the propaganda and to you know, I'm thinking here of sort of the George Gross, another German Jewish artist, right? So there's so many ways that you can use this. And so I really want to thank you, Liz.
Thank you so much. Very prominent German expressionist called Emil Nolde, whose work I love. And it's very colorful and very almost tribal. And the man is part of the Nazi party. He is forbidden to paint. He's not allowed to paint because his artwork is not the Nazi aesthetic. And almost immediately, the Nazis set boundaries, what is aesthetically acceptable. It's in a show in 1938 called Degenerate Art, and when they take some of the great artists of the 20th century, some of the great expressionists, and they put their work on display to mock it. It's put on canvas, it has paint splattered near it. I think of all the artists who were shown, over 120, only 6 of them were actually Jewish. The whole way that you're allowed to express yourself in this terrible government has to follow the Nazi line. And on the other side of the street, a much less successful show, which features, you know, this soulless, almost hotel quality art of, you know, these, if you see the work, it's awful. It gets half the people. They don't want to see that kind of stuff. They want to see the degenerate art. And you could look that up online. There's been a few amazing shows about it. Arts, fascinating subject. The center of art in the world in the 1920s and from the beginning of the 20th century till the Nazis destroyed it forever, was in Germany. It was the German Expressionist movement, some of the great art of the 20th century. It wasn't only human beings the Nazis destroyed, they destroyed entire art movements. And after World War II, it became the abstract expressionist movement that took over. German Expressionism kind of died with the Nazis. Really fascinating stuff. It's my favorite time period in art, so I get all excited.